I had gotten to Dostoevsky actually through a self-help recording by a gentleman named Earl Nightingale. As I was going into my senior year of college, I was really into reading these self-help books because I wanted to make as much money as I could after graduation, because I realized that I'm going to have a class reunion to go to and I want to look good for this and stuff. And petty as that may be, the piece of advice that ended up changing my life in Nightingale's recording was that he recommended that for anyone who wants to just become the best possible person, the complete individual, if there is such a thing, one needs to engage or consume pieces of culture like Dostoevsky's The Brothers Karamazov and Solzhenitsyn's The Gulag Archipelago, as opposed to stuff like pulp novels or stupid movies, whatever else is out there. And when I heard that, for some reason, I just have this like knee-jerk reaction where I go right to my local mall, I buy the book, I'll read about 80 pages in the first day, and just love it. I mean, even reading about the characters getting introduced was very fascinating to me. I just never read writing like this, and it was really good. As someone who, really loves, history, philosophy, politics, all these questions that are hard to answer and get people thinking, I never really read literature or cared growing up. So this was a first for me in a lot of ways when I was 23, and it just ended up changing my life. Well, I'd say I knew that the topic was for me when I was taking my senior STEM class in college and I didn't know what I wanted to write about. I was a little puzzled and just couldn't find something that I had a big passion about. I really wanted to go the literary route in some way, but it was just hard for various reasons. And the college I went to actually didn't have a Russian department or speaker. There was an adjunct who taught Russian, but he couldn't help me as much for different reasons. But anyway, the teacher I had, the professor, taught a class called The History of Terrorism. And conveniently, there was a gentleman or guy, whatever you want to refer to him as, named Sergei Nechayev, who committed an unfortunate act, murdered someone in the late 1860s because he broke with his cohorts. Anyway, Dostoevsky's book Demons is heavily inspired by that, and really talks about a lot of the people who I guess he felt mutated out of the movement that was like the Belinsky radicals of the previous time. Mutated might not be a good word for it, but that said, just the fact that like this is the subject matter of the book, that really like got me into Dostoevsky, and I just knew that like this is for me. Well, I guess I did just hint at it, but the next author I encountered was Leo Tolstoy. War and Peace had been one of those books that I don't really know when I learned about it. It's kind of like The Godfather or Citizen Kane. Like you've kind of always known that it existed, but you didn't really engage in it. I was really intrigued by it though because it was, of the same time period as this Dostoevsky guy that I just learned about. But, I just wanted to read. I remember I actually bought it when I was a senior, and I read a couple pages and then just put it down. And I memorized the first line really good because I started it so many times. Granted, I did a lot of coursework, but it was like, I forget, he's like, well, oh, this is embarrassing, but he's like, well, and that I guess Genoa and Lucca are now provinces of the Bonaparte family. I think it starts out like that. I may have got it a little wrong, but that's the gist of it. But anyway, War and Peace is just a book that always intrigued me. It's a challenge. It's one of those things where people, I guess, joke about it and say, well, it's, it's so long, it's like War and Peace or something like that. But anyway, it was a book that I knew I wanted to read. And then some network did a show on it where it's kind of like a Game of Thrones type series that I never saw and never probably will. But I remember seeing the commercial and it really intimidated me. I remember just thinking, I'll have to excuse my language, like, I'm such a dumbass. I have never read this book. Here it is. People are going to be talking about, why do I not know this? And I was just really embarrassed by myself watching a commercial, but that made me get into that, and I really enjoyed it. Took a while to read, but it was just one of the better literary experiences I have ever had. Not quite as good as my first with Dostoevsky, but certainly, another life-changing event for me. That is a tough one. I'm going to answer this, of course, without addressing any current situations, obviously, or anything even political, but I would really, it's tough. If I could ask any question, I would say I'd really like to know, there's a letter he wrote his brother. He requested a bunch of books. I believe one was the Quran, one was Kant's Critique of Pure Reason. There were a few others. Really, a letter I always go back to for some reason if I'm just reading through his correspondence. And I do wonder, did he? And then Hegel's history. Okay, this is the question. I would ask him what he meant when he said, I want you to send me Hegel's History of Philosophy, for my future depends on that. Something along those lines. And like, I was always curious about that. Like, what did he really mean? Why did he want to read that so bad? So that's what I would ask him.